Hey, good evening, everyone. Dr. Alan Christianson here with you and happy to be back. This is our second series, and this one is going to be quite a bit different from the last. The one that we just did, I gave a big overview about the new supplements, their uses or whatnot. And this one, I'll talk about them as well, but really go into depth about the reasons that they're there, the main purposes. Working with thyroid disease since 96, I've seen that there's been certain concerns that are just perennial, some big things that come up over and over. And we'll go through each of those main ones in these next several weeks. And the goal with these is to give you guys some great protocols, some real simple solutions, some steps you can take on your own. We'll talk about the relevance of medical therapy, about diet therapy, how nutraceuticals can fit as part of that, but really making good sense about what differences you can make and how to go about doing that. So tonight we're going to talk all about nodules, and I will really unveil this new nodule reduction protocol. I'll be speaking for about half hour, 45 minutes. So what we're up to tonight, I'll do a reveal of the nodule reduction protocol for you guys. I'll do a quick summary of it. I'll go through all the elements of it and why they all help and how they work together. I'll do a closing summary and we'll grab some questions at the end. So let's dive into the nodule reduction protocol. For starters, I'm going to do a summary of this. I'm going to turn the screen share back on again. There we go. So here's a quick summary of what we'll talk about tonight, things that reduce nodules. I'm actually going to touch on some things that don't reduce nodules. Before doing this, I Googled natural approaches to reduce nodules. I wanted to see if there was just other ideas that have been being passed around that are popular that, might be distractors, might be counterproductive. I didn't see anything that was, I saw one thing that was dangerous actually, and I'll mention that. But yeah, I'll mention a few of the things that are some big popular myths about how to reduce nodules. But the things that are best documented, there's 4 things that are really effective. So the first one is reducing iodine, and that's somewhere below about 100 micrograms per day. And we'll talk more about how to do that. Second one is shrinking the waist for those to whom that applies, not everyone, but there's a really strong link between waist circumference and nodule growth. Number 3 would be TSH, getting the TSH, try to get close to this certain target that I'll talk through. And then last up is the category of nutraceuticals. And, Nodule Control is a blend that I made based upon that, but I'll talk through all the ingredients that are documented to be helpful, what they contribute individually, and how one could expect them to work together. So let's dive on in. And just to mention, I mentioned this last week, and this is still going on for another little over a week, almost 2 weeks. We've got the sweepstakes going on still. So shop.thyroidspecificformulations.com. We've got a pre-order sweepstakes taking place. And 3 people will win thyroid second opinions with me. We'll do an exclusive one-on-one call. We'll go through all the details of your situation, your needs. You get some real clear guidelines from that. And anyone who orders is automatically in as part of it. So really straightforward. So let's do a quick intro to the topic. I won't take a whole lot of time on this. Nodules need no introduction. Most everyone here is here because they're concerned about that, I would assume. So these are lumps. They're lumps of tissue. They can be solid or fluid filled, and they're really prevalent. So people with thyroid disease, the majority have thyroid nodules. The majority, most people. And even if you don't segregate people by the presence or absence of thyroid disease, the risk for nodules is almost the same as your age in years if you're an adult. So check this out. If someone were hypothetically 53 years old, such as your presenter, yeah, I would have somewhere around a 53% risk of having a nodule, if you can believe that. And most of them are harmless, of course, but somewhere around 2 to 5% are cancerous. And thyroid cancer is no joke. It's generally treatable. That's great. But as always, treatment hinges upon early detection. And early detection really means identification and management of the nodules. Now, the other big relevance about the nodules that I think that can be neglected is that even apart from them causing a risk for cancer, there's signs saying that something is wrong. There's signs saying that your body is growing things that it shouldn't. And this really parallels a phenomena called metabolic syndrome. And that's a derangement of fuel utilization, and it correlates with diabetes, heart disease, the risk for many cancers unrelated to thyroid, and just all kinds of nasty things, premature brain aging. So these mean something is off with your body. Even if they weren't a concern by themselves, they are a signal that things are not working well. And the cool thing is that the steps that help with them also help with the underlying causes that give rise to them. So as you make your nodules smaller, you make your body healthier. It's a total win-win all around. I won't take a whole lot of time on this point, but here's some top nodule myths. I just took some time again and just did some Googling just to see, something I've learned from talking to people is that it often takes more time to become disconnected from false ideas than it takes to learn. It takes more time to unlearn than it does to learn. So if there were things you guys are putting a lot of energy into that weren't helpful, I'd want you to be aware of that. One big concern with nodules, some number are suggested to have them biopsied. And there's been an idea that if you do get them biopsied, that'll make the cancer cells spread. No, just the size scales of the partition, the bevel, the opening of the needle, the cells, you can't do that, and it doesn't happen. The benefit of early detection far outweighs any possible idea that way. And yeah, just the size dynamics doesn't make that occur. So that's not a worry. If you did need a biopsy, don't be afraid of that. Know that the benefits outweigh any plausible negatives. Another big myth is that nodules are caused by iodine deficiency. So yeah, that's an idea, and it's not wrong, but it's not relevant. So if there were severe iodine deficiency in some areas, that could be a factor for goiter, and goiter can be a factor for nodules. But we'll talk a lot more depth about this. No, iodine deficiency is no longer the reason. If anything, it's the excess. I just saw a comment pop up here, and I do want to read at that point that nodules can equal brain aging. So yeah, nodules mean more of a risk for metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome means greater risk for Alzheimer's and age-related cognitive decline. So not saying that the one causes the other, but the same things that give rise to one can give rise to the other. So another idea I saw that just wanted to dispel was that parasites cause thyroid nodules. Some talked about blastocystis hominis. I spelled that wrong. Not blastocysts, blastocystis hominis, and then H. pylori. I saw some popular blogs saying that these are the cause of thyroid nodules and you had to eradicate them to stop thyroid nodules. Well, if you've got things wrong with your gut, that should be taken care of either way, no worries. But no, these things don't cause nodules, not at all. And treating them wouldn't make a difference for nodules, good or bad. Ginseng is a treatment for thyroid nodules. Just no data. Nothing bad about ginseng, but no data on that. Glutathione cream. So the thyroid makes a lot of glutathione. Your thyroid manages more free radicals than pretty much any other part of your body. And so it makes its own antioxidants. Now, rubbing glutathione on the thyroid doesn't actually do anything to raise the glutathione in the thyroid. Putting glutathione on your skin, it might lighten your skin. There's some debates back and forth about that, but it doesn't change the glutathione many layers below your skin. And even if you did, there's not data that that's a big driver of the nodule growth. Citrus fruits, special foods for nodules, citrus fruits, macadamia oil, coconut oil. No, they're citrus fruits, macadamia oil. There's a lot of these are a lot of foods that can have their place in a healthy diet for sure. And a lot of great things about citrus, but no special effects upon nodules. And these were actually, I don't know, almost verbatim, some of the top 7 or 8 things that a lot of sites talk about for treating the nodule. So just to briefly dispel those. So next, I want to start going into the relevance about that first step about iodine reduction and why it matters. I'll just talk about some very brief overviews of research. This is just one showing that this is from the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences. The interesting part about iodine is that too much causes bad things to happen, but it's not like these insane amounts. It's not like, you're not like you fall in a vat of iodine and drink it all. It's not stuff like that. This is a good quote. Excess iodine intakes may precipitate nodules, goiter. They went on to list many other types of thyroid disease, but for brevity, I dropped those. At intake, only slightly above physiologic needs. So you may be just a shade above your requirements. And if you're someone who's susceptible to thyroid disease, that shade above can be too much. So let's put some concrete numbers on this. This is a really great document. The World Health Organization has tracked how iodine plays out with thyroid disease all around the world. And before and after fortification, they've seen big differences. And they've then developed these various levels. And if you're catastrophically low, way down here at this level 1, that's very bad for everyone. And we do see more thyroid disease in children. At levels that are considered mildly low, we see the lowest rates of thyroid disease in adults. Here we are at adequacy, so somewhere between up to about 200 micrograms. But just one step above what's considered adequate, we start seeing elevations of thyroid nodules, as well as all other versions of thyroid disease. So literally just a threshold above what's ideal, we start seeing more of this. Now, yes, there's a point where none could be a factor in pediatric structural disease, but even then, not really a factor for adult thyroid disease. And in the thyroid reset diet, I propose a way to get to a lower level of iodine. And I've heard people say, what if I get too little? And you won't. If your diet has a variety of foods, all foods have some. And if you're getting a variety of foods from many categories, you'll not get too little. You'll not get below, honestly, even like this range. I see many people that will try to gauge their stores, their levels in ways after they've been on it. And it's almost impossible to get below even that level 3 in the modern world. So you'll not get there. Even if you did, these things don't impact adult disease. And for those on thyroid medication, there's really no way to get deficient because you're getting the amounts you need in the medication already. You don't really require it outside of that. So in terms of just the relevance of regulating iodine on thyroid health, this is a cool study I wanted to briefly touch upon. This was one in which they took a group of people, had them lower iodine for, this was for 3 months. Average age was 41, mostly female. They'd had thyroid disease for about 2 to 4 years. So check this out. Average TSH score was 14.28. They were pretty badly hypothyroid. And in this trial, what we saw was that 78.3% got normal thyroid function in 3 months. Now, of the few that didn't get totally better, 4 of them still radically improved. So 97% of people saw totally normal thyroid function or TSH scores down by half within 3 months by doing nothing else. And the TSH, as we'll talk about, has a strong relationship with nodules. So the higher the TSH is, the more nodules are apt to grow. So iodine directly can affect nodules, but also it can indirectly by its effects upon TSH scores. And this is odd because the thyroid needs iodine to work, right? So you'd think that more iodine would make it work better. But because it needs it so badly, a little bit too much just shuts it right off. You get above that low threshold and the thyroid has to lower its activity. Otherwise, it would make way too much hormone. So yeah, so nothing can stop the thyroid quicker than extra iodine can. Last point on this, here was another paper just saying that goiter and nodules were reported in studies that included excess iodine intake in the populations. So the main action step number 1, the first one here, this is crazy easy. Just if you don't have it, grab the thyroid reset diet, take a peek at the green light foods. The book talks a lot in depth about the whole iodine story, and you can nerd out with me in those first few chapters if you want. I'd love to have you there. But if you want to really make it streamlined, just grab the food lists and look at some of the recipes. And yeah, if you're doing green light foods, you'll be fine. If your nodules have stabilized, your thyroid function's gotten better, you've got the option of adding back in some yellow light foods. So action step 1 is that. It's that easy. Now, the next one is about weight loss and weight reduction. I should say just waste reduction. I talked about this so much in the metabolism reset diet, and that's really because the link that waist circumference has with metabolic health, with one's risks towards metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, diabetes, and there's direct ties between that and thyroid nodules as well. A study that I'm sharing here in this image shows that of the things that predicted the growth of thyroid nodules, the strongest correlation was found with waist circumference and also triglycerides and fasting plasma glucose levels are the three that are showing up. So they have the strongest relationship. So nodules tie into metabolic health. The more you're lapsing into diabetes or heart disease, the more apt nodules are to grow. And so what's going on inside the body in those states is that it's not really a calorie thing, it's a fuel thing. And people put a lot of thought into, carbs, fats, ketones, protein, one of these being good, one of these being bad. It all kind of makes sense, but it's a little bit missing the point. So there's a molecule called oxaloacetate, and I'm showing an image of that here on the Zoom and Facebook group. And this molecule, it's basically what carbs, fats, and ketones, it's what they're made of. They're all oxaloacetate. One of these is not different from the other radically because they're all the same thing. They're all the same fuel when they're broken down far enough. What happens is when there's too much of that, it's stored as triglycerides, and it causes a whole host of events in the body. And the body starts growing to make room for that. And the growth is mostly targeted to help fat cells get larger so they can take on more of this. If they couldn't do that, these things would build up outside of the fat cells, and that becomes deadly. That's why the body, diabetes is a defense mechanism. High blood sugar is to keep the glucose from getting into the cells. That's where the mitochondria get killed if they get in otherwise. So weight gain, high blood sugar, these are all protective adaptations. Insulin resistance is a protective adaptation. By resisting insulin, you're blocking that fuel from getting into the cells. So the body starts to grow to make room. The problem is that growing can take place in a lot of ways we don't want. And that's the connection for nodules. So that indiscriminate growth signal created to make room to create more fat, to sweep it away, causes nodules to get bigger. So if we can reverse that, if we can cause that signal to get lower, that can cause them to shrink. Now, I really want to own that this doesn't apply to everyone. There are those to where their waist circumference is healthy. How do you know if yours is? Easy thing, inches around the belly button should be less than half of inches of height. So if a woman's 5 feet tall, she'd be 60 inches. Her waist should be less than 30 inches around the belly button. So if you're above that, this is an opportunity. Getting that waist circumference down can radically improve so many parameters of health, but also it can help reverse the growth of thyroid nodules. So how would one do that? This is one, just take a look at the metabolism reset diet. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about how you can do both. You don't have to worry about stressing out on a lot of things at once. With this, you're doing a protein-sparing modified fast. It's easy if you're paleo, vegan, AIP. And basically, it's a whole lot of stuff that conjugates and packages up the fat trapped in the liver, but it's temporarily low in fuel. Now, if you're also planning on the thyroid reset diet, all you have to do is stick with the green light type foods as you do the metabolism reset. And that's super easy because almost everything in the metabolism reset is already on that green light food list. The few things that are not are some types of seafood, a couple examples of dairy, and then whole eggs. So you do have seafood options. You do have a lot of non-dairy options, and egg whites are fine, but those couple tweaks can allow you to get the full benefit of the thyroid reset while you do the metabolism reset. So really, really easy. And quick overview of what this looks like. You're basically doing shakes for breakfast and lunch with resistant starch and a good meal in the evening. You've got optional anytime snacks, lots of sleep, and then these micro workouts, which activate the GLUT4 muscle receptors. So that's the metabolism reset. And we do free groups on Facebook regularly with this. You're welcome to join and get a lot of support. So action step two of the nodule reduction protocol is waist loss. You want the waist less than half of the height. So height to waist ratio of less than 0.5 is the target for that. Now we'll talk a bit about TSH and nodules and a little bit more depth on the connection there. So TSH, also called thyrotropin, that's a fancy image of the molecule over there. This stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So think about the stimulating. it stimulates things to grow. That includes a lot of good things like your bones, your blood vessels, your brain cells, your connective tissue. But it also can include things like nodules. So you want some TSH, you don't want none, but you also don't want too much TSH. When TSH levels are too high, it means your body is low in thyroid hormone, and to compensate, the thyroid swells and tries to grow. Now, if there's junk cells in the thyroid, they're going to grow along with the good cells. That's why TSH can stimulate nodular growth. Here was a really big study that took a look at how controlling TSH levels can affect overall nodule growth. This tracked about 356 female patients, all female, and they were tracked for up to 9 years. Going into this, their average nodule size was about 4 cc's, which is pretty big. In most cases, at 1 cc, we start thinking about biopsying and considering other treatments. So these were women that had some big nodules. And just a few notes to point out. So if lowering the TSH helps shrink them, why not suppress the TSH? Why not take a high dose of medicine and push it all the way down? Well, the top quote talks about that. That was an old approach, but it became more clear that the harm of doing so outweighed any benefits. The harm of a TSH being too low is really atrial fibrillation, cardiac damage, and bone damage, as well as early death. If anyone here is listening, there are many to where a doctor tries to help them by making their TSH go low, or tells them they can ignore the TSH when it's too low. And it's a risk factor. When the TSH is too low, it's a very real risk factor. There are many cases to where people only feel better when the TSH is pushed down. What that means is there's an unresolved cause of fatigue. So you may feel better if you're on too high of a dose, but that's really not the answer. It means there's something that's been missed. And I just had a rather emotional talk with a doctor recently. Many have been led to think that this is okay and it's harmless. And I told him, I said, look, it's a risk. And yes, he was telling me, oh, but I saw this patient and this patient, they didn't have anything go wrong. You don't understand risk in those cases. So a risk means things may go wrong. Doesn't mean they do. There are scores of smokers that don't get lung cancer. That doesn't mean that they weren't at risk. And it doesn't mean that it was bad advice to tell them to quit smoking. I just saw a comment, what is too low for a TSH? Yeah, great one. This is a case to where the danger completely aligns with the normal range. So once you're below normal range, even below 0.4, the risks start to emerge. So a low TSH is below 0.4, a suppressed TSH is below 0.01, so all the way down. But these risks start once the TSH gets low. And that's what they saw from these studies as well, in which they tried to lower TSH to help shrink thyroid nodules. The harm outweighed the benefits. So yeah, so if your doctor says it's okay, it's not, it's still a risk. And if the doctor says, but you feel better like that, what it means is that doctor is unable to find the hidden cause of the fatigue or whatever other symptoms there are. So just know that there are safer ways to feel better that don't have to put you at risk. Another quote below, what they saw was that the magic target was about 0.5 to 0.8 on the range of the TSH. So it's not low, but it's darn close. It's on the low end of the normal range. What they went on to say was that in terms of practicalities, no one could precisely stay on a target that tight. And some drifted just barely below it, and some drifted as high as about 1.3, 1.4. So that's probably a practical range, like 0.4 to 1.4. If you're realistically falling in that, but targeting 0.5 to 0.8, that seems to be the sweet spot for helping nodules shrink. At that point, there's enough of a TSH signal to keep your bones strong, to keep your heart repairing itself, but the signal's low enough to where any stimulation to nodules is lower than their normal cell death rate. Here's just an image showing how the shrinkage was pretty substantial. And it really was. There was many to where the reduction was greater than 60 to 70%. This was a placebo study. There was another group a controlled study, another group that was not treated with that low of a TSH range, and the control group did not see that same level of regression. So controlling the TSH can make a big difference. Now, I want to take a minute and say that that doesn't just mean medication. If someone's on medication, then that's a strategy, but diet can make a big difference for that as well. The paper that I showed earlier along about iodine in diet showed that TSH scores came down by half or more within 3 months just by iodine regulation. So weight loss also typically lowers TSH. So you see a lot of these strategies work together. Now, medication can as well, and all types of medication can do so. The higher a dose someone is on, the lower the TSH goes. And again, you don't want to take too much to where you're below range. So if someone is on medication and they're lowering their iodine, it's really great to work closely with your doctor, let them know what you're up to. And it's very common to need reductions in your dose of medication. One study showed that those who were on medicine and did lower their iodine, 84% could lower their dose and have their levels stay stable and not feel like they were taking too little. They could feel fine from that. So here's a synopsis now for action step 3 is TSH regulation. And the target seems to be 0.5 to 0.8. That's the target. And if you're falling just outside of that, you're still probably going to see the bulk of those benefits. So next up, I'll talk about will be nutraceuticals. And quick summary of that one, basically Nodule Control is formulated with this whole idea in mind. 2 of those once daily. Now, here was a clinical trial, one of the ones that inspired me. This one used a combination of spirulina, boswellia, and curcumin. And in it, the participants, 85% saw a reduction in their nodules. 85% saw their nodules get smaller, almost everyone. And the average reduction was 0.6 cc. So that's a lot. Many who are tracking nodules are seeing them to where they're, 10, 20 millimeters, which is 0.1 to 0.2 cc's. Some are seeing them in the 1 to 2 cc range, but 0.6 of a cc in 6 months, that's a heck of a lot. And that's pretty quick. You can sometimes take 6 to 12 months to see a big change in nodules. So this was really fast. I'm going to briefly mention the constituents used in this study. One was spirulina. This is a rich source of phycocyanin, which is a blue-green antioxidant that can reduce oxidative damage. Now, you may have heard me rail about the high iodine in sea vegetables. Spirulina is not technically a sea vegetable. It's an algae, and it mostly grows in fresh water. It's not iodine-free, but the quantities used in studies like this were far below a threshold in which the iodine was relevant. So that threshold is somewhere around 3,000 milligrams. Below 3,000 milligrams, you'll get less than 10 micrograms of iodine from spirulina. And that's very consistent from batch to batch. So I'm confident in saying that. And that's why I was confident using it in this formulation, even though it's not completely iodine-free. It's well below a threshold to where it's not problematic. And because the evidence was so strong from the study, I just wanted to include it to get those benefits. Boswellia, this is a cool thing. This is a tree resin. If you ever had like pine sap get on something, this is a version of that. Lots of documentation about it, lowering inflammation in a variety of ways, lowering prostaglandins, these inflammatory precursors, helping inflammatory signals like TNF alpha. This is frankincense. This is from the old story way back when. And then the third from that trial was curcumin. And of course, this is a turmeric extract, and lots of benefits about it being of benefit for inflammation, helping blood flow, and lowering glucose. And so again, we're seeing these things come back. The things that regulate glucose can help shrink the nodules. Now, here's another clinical trial about nutraceuticals and thyroid nodules. And by the way, both of these studies were placebo-controlled human studies. This is like real world valid data. This was 642 people, all female participants. And in this one, 76% saw their nodules shrink, and they shrank by about a third. And they saw TSH come down by about 2 points on average. Remember, lower TSH makes nodules less apt to grow and more likely to shrink. So this is more synergy here. This one used inositol and selenium. Inositol, this is categorized as a sugar. it's chemically categorized as a sugar. And this is called a conditionally essential carbohydrate. It's something we need that we can often make, but we cannot always make enough of it. It has a lot of roles in regulating cell growth, cell shape or morphology, and now again, also glucose regulation. This is also a good thing for helping with blood sugar. And there was also selenium used in this trial. Now, this is critical for all thyroid pathways, for forming thyroid hormone, for regulating thyroid free radical damage, for metabolizing and circulating thyroid hormone, for excreting it. I won't go through the whole litany, but it helps all of that. And then, so these things all had separate trials. The other ingredient that I included is one called prunella. This is also called heal all, which is kind of a broad claim. This has been widely used in traditional Chinese medicine. We don't see it as much in Western herbalism, but there's so much good documentation about it. And it's got a very, very robust safety profile. You know, there are some herbs to where their dosing is exacting and they can have side effects if there's too much, and there's some circumstances where they're not appropriate. And there's other herbs that might as well be carrots. You know, you could do a lot and there's really no big issues for harm for them. So prunella is way over on the carrot side of that continuum. And that's why I was very happy to include it. This has been documented in Chinese medicine and many published Chinese studies to benefit thyroid antibodies, help shrink and enlarge thyroid. Not sure why that was a tongue twister, but it was. And also reduce thyroid nodules. So specific benefits. And also even independent of these changes to benefit many other thyroid symptoms, issues of cold and issues of just fatigue. These things can get better from that. So those are the nutraceuticals that are well documented to benefit thyroid nodules, those 7. And that's exactly why I made Nodule Control with them. We've got the selenium, the spirulina, the inositol, the boswellia, turmeric, prunella. And the selenium, I also thought about this too. These are all made to where if you were on several of these, you're not going to overdose on any ingredient. So the selenium is meant to complement the amount found in the Daily Reset bundle and in the other products. It is possible to get too much selenium. That's more of a concern for some types than others, but not a big thing for selenomethionine. But I still thought through the quantities. This is enough to be therapeutic, but it won't be too much for anyone, even if they're on a diet that contains robust sources of selenium, and even if they're on several others of the nutraceuticals. So yeah. So let's put a summary of the whole protocol together here. And I'll just mention how to use this again real quick. And actually, let me rearrange the order briefly. So how to use, this is simple. Another big goal I had behind making these is I wanted to keep the pill counts down. You know, so many cases, people get on these ridiculous pill counts if they take so darn many. And it ends up being unnecessary ingredients. They strain the liver, and it's just a hassle. You know, no one wants to take a handful of pills. So 2 pills once daily, that easy. And this is meant to combine with a Daily Reset bundle. And that's true for really all of these. Now, there's cases in which certain micronutrients, like let's say zinc or chromium or molybdenum, they may be needed for these things to work right. So I'm assuming the Daily Reset bundle is there rather than including them in every formula. If I did put the other essential nutrients in every formula, you'd get too much if you were on multiple items. So really, with the Daily Reset bundle as your foundation, these others then can go on top of that to help you personalize that for your best needs. And you'll get the good amount of all the essential nutrients, but never too much of anything. And that's a big problem. It really does happen. Actually, right now, 20% of those who are admitted to the emergency room with liver failure, it's from excess use of supplements, believe it or not. Good documentation about that. So do think about a 12-month minimum as a good minimal time frame for using nodule control. It does take time for them to really shrink and stay stable. So let's do a summary about the whole nodule reduction protocol, and then we'll start chatting with you guys. That'll be a lot of fun. So first step, number 1, is reduce iodine to under 100 micrograms per day. Thyroid Reset diet, green light foods, super easy. Number 2 is shrink waist. Now, if the target of less than half of height is not realistic, any reduction helps. And this is the thing that I don't think people hear enough about waist loss or weight loss, is that 95% of your health benefits come with just a few pounds or a few inches. So even if you think that an ideal range is not attainable, the health benefits come really easily. Most people, from doing one metabolism reset, they can get to a place to achieve almost all or all of the health benefits from weight loss. And if they wish to go further, they can, but you can get healthier even without massive amounts of change of the body. So that's cool. Next is the TSH target. Waist loss helps with that. Lowering the iodine helps with that. This can be also a thing of collaborating with one's doctor for adjusting, working with medications. I saw one thing come in chat about, do you prescribe thyroid hormones? So I don't practice currently, but my doctors do. So integrativehealthcare.com. Our team works in Arizona, California, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Idaho. I believe those 6 states. And yes, we do prescribe and manage thyroid hormones with the goal of helping people need less and maybe need none, and to do as good as possible and get the health back that they had before they needed them. So yes, we can help with that part of it for those who do need guidance that way. And then last up is nodule control. And I've come to realize that nutraceuticals, when they're formulated well and they're safe ingredients, why would you not include them? These other steps are important and they're valuable. They can take some effort, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. They can all take some work. They're good in a lot of ways. They're worth doing. But the nutraceuticals are the easiest part of this. 2 pills a day, and we can see things of reductions like 85% can see reductions and substantial reductions. So that's a big deal, and I'm super happy to share this with you guys. And along with just reduction, I failed to really talk about this. The ingredients have also been documented to cut the risk of cancerous development. So there's data about those in the studies to where, apart from the nodules shrinking, the structure of the thyroid and other markers of cancer risk can also improve. So we can see a lower risk for thyroid cancer overall. And I've heard some say, hey, my nodules are quite large. They may not go away. Would this still help? I don't want them to become cancerous. That can also be a good application of just using this preventively to cut the risk of them becoming cancerous at some point. So that was what I had. Pretty much on track for time. And just to mention again, we've got the pre-order sweepstakes. Any orders make you eligible for that. And I'll grab 3 winners and do thyroid second opinions with them. This is a $800 some odd value, and just totally a gift to you guys because I wanted to give back. I enjoy hanging out, and I want to just thank those who help us out early along. The pre-order period is now. That's going to go on through the end of January. We start shipping by or before February 1st. So I appreciate your willingness to order before then. And as a thank you, I'll take some time with a bunch of you guys personally. And that's there. Okay, so we are at 43 minutes, about 40 minutes after I got properly unmuted. And I'll keep Instagram going for a little bit more. And I'll repeat the questions that come up because I'll be hearing them in my ear. So I'll repeat them for you all so you hear them. And we will start grabbing in some questions. So let me stop the screen share. There we go. And I'm going to take a look. We got a whole bunch of lovely people here this evening. And I see a bunch of hands up. Let me get to just a couple of these. And if you've got a question, if you were here tonight with me and there was a question you had about thyroid nodules, thyroid care, your specific situation, you've got the option of pressing raise hand within Zoom. And if you're with me on Facebook, there's a link you have. You can still join us on Zoom. You can raise your hand and we could talk directly just like this, real time video if you're brave enough. And I'll be happy to give you some good details. And likewise on Instagram, there's a link that we've got up in the comments. You're welcome to follow that and come on over. I'll see if I can't take a peek at some of the comments on Instagram as well to cover some of those. But best way is to come on with us on Zoom and raise your hand. So the way this works is I will first hit ask to unmute. You will see a thing pop up on your Zoom control and you'll just have to manually unmute on your end. And then that's it. Just start talking. I will then see you. If you are able to join on video, I'd love that. I'd love to just see you in person, and everyone else would too. If not, if it's a bad hair day or you weren't planning on it, I totally get it. No worries. I understand. So Here we go. And I'm seeing some comments go up in chat as well. And on chat, the questions there, I can't always get to all of those. I do watch those and I think about those things for future topics and future discussions. But if you're putting a question for me in chat, know that your odds will be a whole lot better if you raise your hand and just ask that directly. Josh, my buddy Josh is helping out. He's answering some things in chat there as well. So some logistic things are showing up in there. But yeah, the clinical things about nodules and thyroid care, things like selenium, I saw one pop up. Yeah, please, Gary, just drop those in the raise your hand and let's cover those directly. All right, without any more delay, I'm going to ask Emma to unmute. And Emma, you're welcome to go for it.
Hi, Dr. Christianson. Thank you so much for offering this to all of us.
Hey, Emma. How you doing tonight?
Good, thank you. So
Good,
I have
good.
so many questions, but I will try to ask one and hope that everyone else will ask others.
Do you mind me if I forgot to say something really quick? You get it already, I hear, but I forgot to say this. Yeah, when you come, if you wouldn't mind keeping your question brief, I'll give a really good, precise answer. I want to do as many as I can for you guys. So Emma's got the right idea, and let's all support each other here and cover a bunch. So yeah, go for it.
Great. So I actually have read your reset book and seen the green light foods, and I'm one of the assumptions that I had is that most of the red light foods are processed, apart from things like dairy. And that's because we can't determine how much iodine is in those processed foods, right? So that's a big source of iodine.
Let me address that one real quick first. So just to recap for those on Instagram world, Emma's questions, the first part of her question is about looking at the green light, red light foods. She saw that a lot of the red light foods were processed. And the thought was that maybe it's harder to assay the iodine content in them. And that's why they're there. Not so much. So there have been a lot of studies about assaying iodine in food. And I don't know if you've dug around anywhere else online, Emma, or if others have online. If you look at iodine content in foods, besides my work, you won't see much. You'll see a list of like 5 or 10 foods, and you'll see that same list repeated over and over and over again. If you go to nutrient data or any of the big nutrient databases, they're all silent on iodine content. But there have been many USDA studies, and what they've done is they've taken foods from 4 different parts of the country each year and analyzed them for iodine content. So that was one big source that I had. There's about 20 sources I took and I pulled together. So iodine is measurable, but it varies a lot from food to food. And it's not even a matter of the processing. It's because iodine is a very unstable molecule. So even if they use a certain amount at early stages of production, you might have a lot more, a lot less available when it reaches the consumer. So I took these foods and I averaged them, and I saw that some foods had consistent amounts. Other foods had highly variable amounts. And some foods usually had none, but sometimes had a ton in them. And that's how I built those lists. And my mindset in building those lists is I wanted to make sure that anyone who was following the list wouldn't stumble across a food that sometimes had a lot. So the foods that sometimes had a lot, even if their average was low, I still called those red light. But so, yeah, it wasn't just because iodine was hard to measure in processed foods.
Got it. Okay. So then this is sort of a 2-part question, but then how do we, because like corn tortillas, for example, is generic, right? Like I get sprouted 100% corn tortillas, and corn is on the green light list. So how does that differ? And then the other part of this question is, do we stop using iodized salt, and how do we measure our intake?
Okay, great questions. So Emma's 2 other questions were foods like corn tortillas. The ingredients look like they should be rather low in iodine, but yet the listing showed that they were not. How would that make sense? And the last part was how to choose salt and how to know how much salt to use. So there was a couple of things in the iodine content that I saw that made just surprise the heck out of me. I think the weirdest one was frozen cantaloupe. I saw multiple assays of frozen cantaloupe that had insane amounts of iodine. Another weird one is prune juice. Plums have none. So why would it be in prune juice? There's no salt, go figure. But many assays showed there was a lot there. So the technical answer for a lot of those things is, I don't know. But this is an example of where we can predict or we can be sure. And given the iodine content in the constituents, you would think some foods would be fine. but I want to be sure. So I look at the assays. And if the assay goes against what we would predict, got to trust the assay. Even if you wouldn't expect it to be there, if it was there, that's significant. Then there's some weird things like sherbet, which is like what, pureed fruit and sugar and some texturizer. Sometimes that stuff has like 1,000 micrograms per serving. There's some really weird sources out there that you just wouldn't expect. And that was part of why I wanted to dig deep and figure out where it was. That was a big factor behind that. And so now for salt, I've talked about this a bit before, but Diamond brand kosher is my favorite for cooking. Malden sea salt, my favorite for finishing. As far as quantities to use, I don't feel that most of us need to think too much about the exacting quantities of that. In terms of iodine, you don't at all. Those things are essentially devoid in it. So you'll not overload iodine by even using like very liberal amounts. I would encourage using salt to taste. And, if you do use a high amount of salt, your taste buds get used to that and you end up needing more and more. So use it to taste, but don't be ridiculous with it. But yeah, you won't get too much iodine from those types of salt at all.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight, Emma. All right, so next up we've got Therese. Therese, I'm going to, let me just real quick update my mute settings. There we go. Therese, I'm going to ask to unmute and go for it. You'll be able to start speaking momentarily.
Thank you, Dr. Christianson. So nice to have this webinar tonight. I'm loving it.
Thank you.
The nutraceuticals look beautiful, the ingredients, I'm very interested in them, but I have a question about your sourcing. Like I'm very anti any supplements from China, for example. For sure. And also, how do you guarantee the purity and quality of your supply chain ingredients?
That's an awesome one. Josh is in our chat, I believe, still. I can let him put some more details in that. Nothing is sourced in China. I am involved with every stage of this production and raw material source. And I'm so proud of these. These are made by GMP manufacturers that make medications as well. So yeah, we've got the purity, we've got the quality control, and I put so much work into that. I wanted to start this project probably about 3 years ago, if not more, but I took the time to really do this right. So yeah, the way we've done this, the procedures we put in place, the testing systems in place, I'm very comfortable with, and we're happy to provide any detailed data that could be useful for you along those lines.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that, for guaranteeing quality, because sometimes problems happen, just through things slipping through, right?
Yeah, and I share all of your concerns and then some. I've been aware of the shortcomings of the industry, of really any time that people are involved, there can be issues. So I'm very concerned about quality control and checks and balances, and I'm a bit of a maniac about all that. So I completely respect your concerns and share them.
Thank you for that. Another quick question. I'll be quick. My TSH is currently 1.530. I'm assuming that's a bit high.
Well, a bit high. So in terms of ideal levels for helping nodules come down, you could be a shade lower. If you're on medication, it's hard to adjust medication to move the TSH by units less than many tenths. So yeah, you could risk.
I'm not.
Okay. If you're not, these very steps that I've outlined could well improve your scores the last little bit that they would need.
Right.
One of the studies on the nodule control ingredients saw TSH score reductions that were quite significant. So yeah, just these steps alone, I would never encourage you to get on medication with levels like that. But these other steps, if anything, could easily help that come down that remaining amount.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, we got my dear friend Joanne here. All right, Joanne, let's hear what you got for us.
Hi, Dr. C.
Hey, good night, good evening.
Okay. Very quick question for tonight. Since I started working with Dr. Espinal, I've been getting the thyroid ultrasounds. So for the last 3 years, I've had yearly ultrasounds and no nodules. So I went to every other year. So how quickly do nodules grow? Am I okay by being tested every other year, or should I stick with once a year? Because how quickly do they grow?
Not quickly. No, generally they take decades to form. The funny thing is that when things grow, there's how long it takes for them to emerge and become detectable and how long it takes them to enlarge. And those are very different things. When they're not detectable, to see them show up in the first place, that often does take years or even decades. So they tend to grow by cell doubling. And so you can have a lot of cell doublings that are microscopic, but once you finally got like a pinhead, then your next doubling might be, a pea. Your next doubling might be a marble. So once something is there, if it's growing, it may seem to grow fast, but if there's nothing you can see, it takes a long time for something to grow enough to where you could see it.
All right. So every
even
other
if it
year
is growing, which it's likely not. But yeah, you're totally fine stretching those out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just saw a brief one. I wanted to recap a point that I mentioned before. Someone heard that if they have Hashimoto's, they should not take spirulina. I did choose spirulina because of the clinical trial showing that it helped nodules. The only real negative about it is the iodine content. Now, if you're using spirulina in really high doses, like doses way above about 10,000 milligrams per day, some take that much using it as a protein source. At that point, it'll contribute to excess iodine and not a good thing for Hashimoto's. But yes, in amounts below 3,000, no drawback and some clear benefit. All right, next up, we've got Ingrid. So Ingrid, I'll ask you to unmute. There we go, and go for it.
Great, thank you. Just two quick questions. This is for my daughter who has nodules and she couldn't be here tonight.
Okay.
So she has trouble swallowing capsules. Are your Nodule Control, is that a gel cap that you could put into a smoothie or does it have to be swallowed? And then secondly, just some examples perhaps of the green and orange and red light foods, just a couple examples.
Sure. So first off about the capsules, these are capsules, not gel caps. Gel caps are oil-based for oil-based ingredients. So you'll find those for like fish oil or vitamin E, but rare, not for dry ingredients. Now, the very easy workaround, you can add that to smoothies. And these are thin-walled capsules. A cool trick is you can put them in smoothies and not even open them, and they'll blend up and dissolve into nothing. Now, let me think through the ingredients and their taste. Nothing in there is like super icky as far as those particular ingredients. So she could try that as it is. Another cool trick for those who have a hard time swallowing. So if gel caps go down, but capsules don't, gel caps have a thicker gelatinous coating than capsules do. Now, a super easy way to make that. So take the capsules, and this is pretty much any capsule, put them in about 2 ounces of water, swish them around for like 10, maybe 20 seconds. Now you've got a gel cap as far as your throat is concerned. You've got it more swollen on the outside and there's more mucilage around the outside, so it's slipperier. And in that case, just drink the whole thing down. Okay. But that's a really easy trick for those who have a hard time with capsules. So yeah, try out just dropping it in the smoothies. It might go fine. If it does taste icky with doing that, then just try putting them in a cup of water, rinsing it. If it sits too long, the capsule may open in the water, but that rarely happens at less than 30 seconds at the least. So yeah, 10, 20 seconds, swish it around good, wash them right down. Okay. And what was the other part?
And just a few examples.
Oh, the red light. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So all food categories have options of red light, yellow light, green light, some more than others. Pretty much all veggies, intact whole grains, beans, nuts and seeds, most types of meat and poultry are going to be green light foods. Some yellow light, red light foods, some seafood, some types of seafood are green, some are yellow, some are red. Dairy foods, many are red, some are yellow. Egg whites are green, egg yolks are yellow. So those are a few examples.
Okay.
But yeah, pretty much all the categories, you've got a lot of options.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we'll need to get your book. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Beth, you are up next. I'm going to ask to unmute and go for it, Beth.
The question I had is, how do you feel about using castor oil packs directly on our thyroid? Is that a good idea?
I can understand the reasons and logic behind that, and I can see no drawback to it. Yeah, castor oil may help circulation when it's on the skin above things that are underlying, but yeah, no drawback to it. My personality, my tendency is that I just like to really home in on things that I know are likely to work, that I've actually, here's data showing it works, like here's large studies showing that it works. So things that may work well, totally fine, no drawback that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, Instagram, I'm coming up on the hour mark. I'm going to drop whether I drop or not. They'll cut me off on this. So just wanted to let you guys know there is a link. You can come hang out on the Zoom party or on the Facebook party. Welcome to have you there. But I'm going to close this one out intentionally. And thank you guys for being here. I'll be here live for a few more minutes on the others. All right. Take care and have a good evening. All right. So that was for Instagram, and I'm with you guys still on Facebook and Zoom. Okay, so next up, let's get Maria. Maria, I'm going to ask you to unmute and go for it with your question. Maria, I can't hear you just yet. You know, if I had as big of a snafu, it seems somebody else should have a bit of a snafu with their mute button. Hey, Maria, if you're on and you're listening to me, please raise your hand again. And I'll come back to you after the list, but I'll move on and give Carla a shot here next. So Carla, I'm going to hit ask to unmute and go ahead and go for it. You can just start speaking.
Thank you so much for the seminar and allowing us to participate. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
My question is about the source of nodules. Mine were discovered about 10 years ago. My thyroid panels have always been pretty much normal. TSH rising slightly, and the naturopath says it's like suboptimal. So,
you know any numbers off the top of your head?
It's around 2 point something.
Okay.
But my Hashimoto's antibodies are always, if not low, then in the negative. And I had heard that Hashimoto's is the cause of thyroid nodules, but I've also heard high Epstein-Barr, which I have antibodies for. So is it really necessary to determine why you have the nodules, or should you just really work on optimizing your thyroid?
You know, more so the latter. And in terms of causes of nodules, there's a strong association with Hashimoto's and nodules. Now, not a perfect one, though. And a little more depth about both of those things. So Epstein-Barr antibodies. I've got a paper. Let me see if I can grab this link real quick. I wrote a detailed paper about Epstein-Barr antibodies. There's different versions of them. And the types that are commonly tested are ones that 99% of adults have positive, but they're not relevant. They simply show that someone has been exposed in the past, like pretty much all of us have.
Right. I've had all 4 levels tested. And so I think it's the IgG that your immune system is over 800. So it's not an acute affection.
Yeah. So what that means is you've been exposed at some time in the past, and that means that you're a normal human. It has no relevance to your thyroid health or anything else. I'm going to drop this in chat real quick. If anyone is curious about a paper I wrote, a really good detailed paper about thyroid antibodies and the relationship to thyroid disease. Epstein-Barr virus and its relationship with thyroid disease. So there it is. But yeah, I wouldn't stress about that one. Now, thyroid antibodies, you said very low, not high, sometimes negative. So with Hashimoto's, many people never have measurable antibodies, and many have antibodies that are very low. So lacking elevated thyroid antibodies is not a rule out for Hashimoto's. So if that's useful to be aware of.
So then how do you know if you have Hashimoto's?
Well, by and large, if you've got thyroid disease and no other explanation, if your thyroid is slowing, if there's structural changes, sometimes the ultrasound will see the properties of Hashimoto's, such as called heterogeneity, or like pockets like Swiss cheese appearance or heightened vascularity. But by and large, if someone's thyroid clearly is slowing or there's structural abnormalities and no other reason for it, we assume that they have Hashimoto's. A lack of antibodies does not rule out Hashimoto's. The presence of antibodies confirms Hashimoto's, but a lack of them doesn't rule it out.
So then there are specific questions to ask about your imaging of your nodules?
Oftentimes they'll talk about various properties like that, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I'm sorry, to be really precise, that was not so much details of the nodules, but details of the thyroid itself, as far as the structural signs of Hashimoto's.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Lucinda, you're next up. I'm going to ask to unmute. Let me just update my mutes again here real quick. There we go. Lucinda, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. C.
You're welcome.
My question is, about the supplement for nodules. You said to take it a minimum of 12 months. If everything improves, is there a reason that you couldn't just keep taking it long term? Because I'm already 72, right? And you said that the nodules, the likelihood, it's not going to get better as you get older. So is there any reason that you should quit after a period of time, or can you take it long term?
There's not. And that's a really good question. A lot of these core issues are things that one could manage longer term, like cutting the risk for the nodules becoming cancerous or keeping them from growing back again. My thought with the 12 months was I didn't want someone to have the expectation that if they did come down really fast, they should just call it good, because it takes a while for them to come down and really stabilize. But to your point, no drawback to longer term usage.
Okay, thank you so much. Good
question. Jean, next up. Jean, iPhone 12 Pro. Jean staying current on things better than I am. Analogy I thought of is that data updates, and we learn new things over time. And sometimes we think like, does science change its mind? Is it not current? I mean, why would you change things? And I realized, we update our phones. We get new software, we get new hardware. We understand that. And it's the same way for information. That's why I like to update the formulas every so often, just like the way we update our phones. So, okay, that was a bit of a ramble, but asked to unmute. Go for it, Jean. Let's hear your question.
Hello, doctor.
Hey, Jean.
So I had a biopsy and they found that I needed to have surgery because it was probably cancer. So when they went in, they found one nodule had papillary cancer. And the doctor decided to remove the whole thyroid. So now the endocrinologist wants to keep the TSH at 0.38 or thereabouts. So I know you mentioned, that 0.5 to 0.8 is good. And I think her logic was that it's less chance for any more cancer to grow. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so there's a distinction between treatment post-cancer and treatment to manage nodules. It's a similar concept in that a low TSH is a low signal on thyroid cells or thyroid-like cells. And that's true for thyroid cancer as well as the nodules. The 0.38, to get really nitty-gritty, we start seeing risks emerge from a low TSH below about 0.35, believe it or not. And it sounds like your doctor is probably aware of that number. So the risks are non-existent, if any, at 0.38. Now, we don't have a dial for the TSH. So in the real world, in terms of logistics, you can adjust a dose responsibly and test regularly. And it's darn hard to keep it at one number or at a tight range. So if you were erring slightly above that, there's no data arguing that you would be reducing the benefits. Couple of thoughts. Jean, have you seen my talks about rules for accurate blood tests with your thyroid?
I don't think so. If I did, it was a while ago.
Okay, so it's just some thoughts. If your tests are not done in a way to get the best results, that makes there be more variability even on top of that. One thing to know is that the tests themselves, they have an inherent variability of about 0.5 to 1 full point. So your same blood sample, if you could divide it and get that same blood sample tested twice, they might be half a point or more different, up to a point different. So you can never have it totally precise. On your end, though, the things you can control, stop any vitamins that have biotin for 3 days before you get your blood test. That would include the daily reset bundle. Do your blood before you take your thyroid medicine that day. Do your thyroid tests in the morning. Do them fasting. For women who are menstruating, avoid mid-cycle. You want to do it the first week or the last week of the cycle. But those things, and also just knowing that there's some inherent variability, can probably make things a lot simpler for yourself and your doctor. I do see some that give very narrow targets and then just get so frustrated when they can't stay exactly there.
That's very good advice. I appreciate that. And so a good range would be, are you saying somewhere between 0.35 and 0.4?
Well, so that's again a super narrow range. If you were your same blood sample could get a 0.4 and a 0.9, just if that same sample was tested repeatedly. So you've got to give a fudge factor of about half a point to even up to a point. Now, if there was a trend where like your test you were getting higher and higher and higher, you were like 1.5, 2, 2.5, that's time to make a change. Or if you were getting lower and lower and lower. But if one test you were a 0.4, one test you were a 0.9, if I were managing you, I wouldn't necessarily raise the dose at 0.9. I might retest sooner because that might have been just a fluke. So that's just the mindset I'd love for you and your doctor to have.
Okay. Well, so far it's been just about 0.3 to 0.38. So I guess it's pretty consistent.
You're
I'm
doing a
glad.
lot better than average, and I hope you stay there.
Okay. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Michelle. Michelle, you are up next. I'm going to hit ask to unmute and go ahead and start speaking, and I'll hear you.
Can you hear me, Dr. C?
I sure can. Everyone's afraid of video now, and that's okay. I won't fault you, but let's hear what you got.
I'm a video virgin. This is my first time, so I'm just making sure I'm doing it right.
You're doing totally fine.
Thank you. My question, believe it or not, is a perfect follow-up to the prior question.
Okay.
I'm curious to know, I'm under the impression that in, let's say, mainstream medical world, that if a biopsy of a nodule is done and if there's a positive result for malignancy, I'm under the impression that the standard practice is surgically remove the thyroid gland. And my question is, I'm wondering, in your practice, so for you, for the doctors on your staff, I understand not when you're doing consultations, but for your actual patients, do you respond in the same way to doing a fine needle biopsy on a patient getting a result of malignancy? Do you respond the same way that the thyroid gland should be surgically removed? Or do you have treatments that would then focus on reversing, eliminating the disease, healing the thyroid? I'm curious about that.
I'm aware of no natural treatments that would reverse existing thyroid cancer. There are some edge cases, and there are some things that are called pre-malignancy or atypical cells. And this is not something that's unconventional or that's alternative, but in the conventional world, there now is a view that some types of things that would have been called thyroid cancer in the past are things that are now given more of a watch and wait approach. So there are some situations, so not all positive biopsies warrant surgery, but by and large, there are no natural things that make the cancers go away once they are there. So yes, if there was a recommendation for that, I would support that and encourage that.
And your doctors would do the same for their patients at your practice?
Yeah, I do the same for my wife or myself or my mom. Yep.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that to me. I was curious about that. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Jack is up next. Go for it, Jack. What have you got for us tonight? Ask to unmute. There we go.
Oh, hello. Doctor, I am not, Jack is
You're not Jack. That's okay. You're still welcome.
I forgot to change my name. I'm so sorry about that. And it's so nice to see you.
Good to see you too. What's your name?
Danielle.
Danielle. That fits a little better, but
yes. Jack is my 12-year-old son. But anyway.
Okay.
I am very excited about this nodule control. I would like to go for it. I just have a quick question. You mentioned about, other supplements and combining supplements. So I've been on your thyroid daily essentials for about a year, and I've been seeing like lots of improvement. Thank you for that.
Good.
So I'm not on the daily reset. I'm on this thyroid daily essentials, right? So I would assume that it's okay to combine with the natural, the nodule control, but I am taking a couple other things like prebiotic, probiotic, fish oil, I started taking enzymes for my digestion, and I also saw another improvement, like a huge improvement overall for some issues that I have because of my Hashimoto, right? But, you know, is it okay to add the nodule control on top of enzymes, on top of the thyroid daily essentials? I was going to start another treatment, but I may just hold on to that and then start your nodule control. I just don't want to overwhelm my system.
Sure.
Or
the other treatment you were talking about, that was for nodules or for some other purpose?
Yeah.
Honestly, those 7 things that I outlined there, the 7 nutraceuticals that helped, there's nothing else published that helps. There's no other ingredients that are documented to be useful. I've scoured so hard. If there were, I would have put them in there. And if there was other steps you could do as far as dietary change or whatnot, I would have talked about that tonight. So the things you've talked about are compatible with that. Now, so the Fresh Start Essentials, that's a thyroid specific multivitamin. The Daily Reset Bundle is a multi like that with the fish oil, with the calcium magnesium. Now, fish oil, there's a lot of good ones on the market. They can have iodine. So we do assay hours for iodine. And I put a lot of work into finding ones that have really almost no measurable amounts of that. Other versions of fish oil, you may be getting a load of iodine in them. That's the consideration.
Okay.
So the Daily Reset Bundle, basically you get the Fresh Start Essentials plus the fish oil plus a full dose of calcium magnesium. There's a few versions of calcium magnesium that are out there, and some of them are insoluble. And those can be a problem to cause parathyroid disease or calcifications in those with thyroid disease. So the CalMag that I've used is one that's plant derived and it's water soluble, so it's compatible. So yeah, if you wanted to just swap out the Fresh Start Essentials, I do make the Thyroid Daily, and that's the multi-part of the Daily Reset Bundle. Okay. But the bundle is basically that plus the fish oil plus calcium magnesium, and they're compatible with the Nodule Control.
Okay, so I should just maybe make that switch then.
Yeah. So the cool thing too is that I did this to where we could cut the pill counts down a lot. Mm-hmm. So it's the Fresh Start Essentials. Is that one 4 or 6 a day?
It's 4. I actually take 2 usually, and I feel good.
Yeah. You know. So it's formulated for 4 a day for the full amount. So the Thyroid Daily is actually 1 a day. So it's just 1 pill once daily.
No, I have the Thyroid Daily Essentials. I think it's 4 a day.
No, the Fresh Start Essentials, the new one that just came out, the new thyroid, the new one that I'm just talking about is 1 daily.
Oh, I don't think that's the one I have.
No one has that yet. It hasn't shipped yet.
No, okay.
Okay. That's on the new Thyroid Specific Formulation site. Okay. But that's one daily, and then the 1 fish oil and the 3 CalMag caps. So that's the once a day dose for all of that.
I'll make the switch then, and then drop the other fish oil I'm taking, keep the probiotic. And one last quick question. So I was gonna start a treatment with my chiropractor to reduce the amount of histamine. He was telling me about histamine and immune system correlation. So I may just hold off on
correlation with thyroid nodules or other things.
Not thyroid nodules, but like immune system overall, like, you know, what could be like causing some issues that I'm having, right?
Yeah, you know, you may hold off on that. Some of the steps I outlined too, if those are things that are applicable as far as TSH or waste or iodine content, these things all have huge impacts upon your overall health. You may see that you're feeling better or doing better in a lot of other ways from that too. So yeah, I always love to streamline your approaches and, you know, do the things that are most important.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming tonight.
Bye.
Okay. Debbie, you know, one quick point I wanted to make too, talking about pills and pill counts. I thought a lot about keeping pills cost effective and getting the exact right ingredients, the exact best amounts, nothing extra. And also I thought about pricing structures. You know, I hate it when you buy something and it goes on sale next week. So I'm not going to play games with this kind of stuff. I price these things very aggressively, and that's how they'll be. We won't have sales. There's not going to be big radical specials. So the sweepstakes that I'm doing, it's not a sale, it's a bonus. It's a bonus of me and my time. But I didn't want to put room in there for sales. I want to just give you guys good pricing on a daily basis. So yeah, pill count, great value, quality control. I put a lot of thought into these things, and I just wanted to really give back. So Debbie, let me get a couple more here. Debbie, go ahead, and I hit ask to unmute, and you are up.
Hi,
Hey,
I had
Debbie.
a question. I had a question. My last TSH in September was 0.037.
Okay.
The test before that in March was 0.759.
Mm-hmm.
If you are eating a lot of seafood, if you have extra iodine, can it affect that TSH?
It can. And the funny thing is it can do that. It can do nothing. Some people can tolerate that quite a bit. It can make it go a lot higher, and it can make it go, in rare cases, but not unusual cases, it can make it go lower. So that's called iodine-induced hyperthyroidism. So a lot of seaweed might have made it higher. Maybe the low one is more normal right now. Are you on thyroid medication?
Yes.
You could be on too much. A lot of seafood might have made it go higher, and it could be vice versa. But yeah, there was a paper, those on thyroid medication who lowered iodine even just by basic steps, 84% saw they needed less medication, and about 40% didn't need any. They were able to come off of it. Now, those that lack a thyroid, that's different. But yeah, even on medication, the steps of the thyroid reset diet can go a long ways towards helping the medication work better and helping you possibly need less over time.
I also heard somewhere that if you have, some people will take iodine, of course, thinking it's going to improve them. Yeah. But I've heard it said you could feel initially better and then really crash.
Sure.
Yeah. And the other question I have is, along with this TSH of 0.037, my free T4 was 0.80.
Mm-hmm.
So that was below par.
Yeah. So the funny thing, and I talk to doctors about this a lot too, the free hormones, they're really not adding much new information to your results. They're honestly not. What happens there is they're highly controlled by your body outside of regulating your thyroid. So even if you've got more hormone than you need, your body can still keep the T3 and T4 in a certain range until it's completely overwhelmed. And even if you've got less hormone than you need, your body can still prop up T3 and T4 until there's just like almost none there. So they're very late to show up. If someone had their thyroid taken out and they were given nothing, that's a horrible state. They would eventually see their T3 and T4 go down. But before then, it would still stay stable for a long time. So yeah, they're not the earliest indicators. The 0.037, that's a hyperthyroid state. That's an excess of thyroid hormone, regardless of what the T3 and T4 say.
Okay, because I went to several doctors and nobody agreed with anybody else. And one doctor said, I says, why would the T4 be low, but the TSH, in the hyper? And he says, well, it probably indicates a dysregulated pituitary issue.
Yeah. So the T4 low normal or slightly low, there's always context to these things too. And with pituitary disease, all the glands start to shut down. The pituitary makes no signal to any gland. It doesn't do it just to the thyroid or just to the adrenals. It's across the board. So with pituitary disease, the TSH goes to pretty much nothing, and the free hormones drop off to pretty much nothing. They're not like subtle. What's very common though, there's 4 stages of hyperthyroidism. And at the first stage, the TSH is low, but it's not 0.01. It's not as close to 0 as it gets. In that stage, many people have a low T4, low T3, low normal T4, T3. And what's happening is your body is dumping out the extra hormone. And because of that, sometimes those hormones get low. Because there's too much, your body's getting rid of them indiscriminately. So yes, that happens.
See, my dad, I got very nervous. And actually my primary at the time, she changed her practice now, but she freaked out, and then I freaked out. She said, maybe you should stop taking your thyroid for a month and see what happens. And my dad had Graves' disease with the eye disease along with it.
Which state are you in?
In Illinois. I stopped it for 2 months because I was so afraid that I was
please
going
don't
to
please don't stop it or change it on your own, because you may have needed, you definitely needed less, but you may not have needed none. You might want to just dig around and, check your care options. You so a little more depth, everyone. So the thyroid second opinions that I offer, in those I don't act as a prescriber, but I can act as a very detailed consultant, and I can be a good liaison to you and doctor of your choice. So you could do one of those as well, and I could completely sort this out with you and give you a plan to help your doctors make sense of it. So that's another option that you've got.
I need help, definitely. So basically call you, right? About
I'll get the link up here. So thyroid second, thyroidopinion.com is the link. I'll put this up, www.thyroidopinion, if I can spell these things right, .com.
Okay.
And I do these things every so often. I am doing them now for these next couple months. So there are a few of those available, and I'd be happy to just talk through this with you and look over all your labs and make total sense of it.
Sure, because I do have Hashimoto's and I've been having nodules, and so far a biopsy has shown nothing bad yet. So, but I do need direction because these varying opinions are driving me crazy.
Yeah, we could totally make sense of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, Claire, let me get just a couple more. We're trying to just about covering all the bases here. That's really good. I asked to unmute, and Claire, you are up. Let's hear what you've got.
So Claire is actually my daughter. I'm Lori. Yeah.
Everybody's kids use a Zoom for school,
really
huh?
know how to. So this has been great. I wanted to ask you if there's any value in having an iodine level, either urine or serum done. I've done both of them and they've been normal, but I don't know how reliable they are.
Yeah, good question, Lori. I'm going to give you a really good answer. I'm also going to give you a link. The short answer is, so logically, someone could think about, they heard a doctor say that lowering iodine might help their thyroid. And a logical thing to think is, I should test and see if my iodine level is too high and see if that would help me or not. And makes perfect sense. Now, some of the studies that looked at iodine reduction, some of them did that. And they looked at the levels of iodine in people before and after they did a low iodine diet. And if we were in a logical, simple world, you would think that those who had high iodine were the ones that got better, more so than those that had low iodine. But that's not how it works. So there's no predictive value. And here's why. And I put a link up in our chat of a detailed article I wrote about this. So iodine is in the thyroid, it's in the urine, and it's in the blood. Those three are separate compartments. The blood levels of iodine, they pretty much bounce all around randomly within a large range. And then if you get so much your kidneys can't clear any, the blood levels spike. So blood levels of iodine, their one and only value is to see if someone is at risk to organ damage from massive amounts of iodine. And about the only way that happens is a medication called amiodarone. It's used for cardiac arrhythmias, not that commonly used. And if someone has had that in the past several months, and you're not sure if they're sick from it's too much iodine still, you do a serum level of iodine on them. There's no relationship between blood levels of iodine and nutritional levels of iodine, nor thyroid levels of iodine. So now urine levels of iodine are good gauges of nutritional iodine for a lot of people, for a population, but there's almost no accuracy for an individual. Each person has so much fluctuation, they would have to test themselves, no exaggeration, over 100 times to be within a reasonable range. So they work in populations, but not in individuals. The one situation where it helps to test, and the one way that it helps to test, there's a test called the urinary iodine to creatinine ratio. It's a little bit less variable than just urine iodine, and it's not quite the same as urine iodine. And it can be useful if someone has been on the thyroid reset diet and it just hasn't helped them. If they've done it for 3 months, they've just, scouts on her, looked at all the sources and done all the changes, and their thyroid hasn't gotten any better at all, they can do a urinary iodine test. If iodine is high, it means one of two things. It means there are some hidden sources of iodine they're still ingesting, or they were so high before that they've not yet detoxed all of it. If their iodine levels were low on a urinary to iodine to creatinine ratio, if they were less than 100 micrograms per gram, it means that they're just in that 3% of non-responders. But yeah, that's the only real time and situation that it helps. And there's that article I put up that talks all about that in much better detail.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And okay, so we have one more here, and that looks like Maria. So go for it, Maria. I'm glad we got to cover the big questions today. Go for it. I'm going to take a peek at chat afterward and see if there's anything that can help with that on there too. But Maria, you are up. Maria, there's an unmute button you've got on your end that you'll have to hit if you're still with us and not in the other room. I'll give you just a minute there. I'm just seeing some other questions. Large difference in the daily reset packs, calcium, magnesium, 200-200 ratio, fish oil in the new Nutraceuticals formula. So the calcium, magnesium in the reset pack in the new formula, it's actually a little higher amounts of both in the new formula. I wanted a little more calcium, magnesium. I was able to give that while lowering the pill counts. So yeah, thank you for that. Hey, Maria, I saw you pop on. Oh, maybe that wasn't you. I thought someone popped on for a minute there. Okay. How much selenium is too much? This is one that I saw too. So a total day's intake that exceeds 800 micrograms, 800, is too much. And believe it or not, too much selenium can slow your thyroid. As critical as it is, too much of that is problematic as well. And the selenium we find in Brazil nuts is a version to where really not a concern. It's a type that the body can quite readily eliminate. So no drawback there. Oh, Maria, it's saying not letting me unmute. Huh. Maria, I'm going to hit the button again. I just hit the ask to unmute again. Let's see. I didn't change any settings on my end. Let me just take a look if I can change anything else. Maria, I'm looking at chat. I'll keep an eye on chat for the next little bit if you want to put your message in there. I apologize, but yeah, it seems to be working for others. I don't know if there's any audio settings you can change as far as which mic you're connected to. So Maria, you're welcome to put a detailed question in chat if you don't mind, and I'll watch out for that. Here's a few more things coming up in chat. Thanks for the selenium answer. You're welcome, Gary. So thoughts on raw dairy and iodine. So Jess, good question. You know, I found some data on organic versus commercial dairy and some on raw dairy, and subtle differences, not dramatic differences. Organic dairy, oftentimes the cows are fed alfalfa. They're often fed, believe it or not, canola plants, which is a good thing, or mustard. They eat more greens, and those greens can bind with more iodine. So they can be a little bit lower in the dairy, but lower by like 25%. So it doesn't really change the whole green light, yellow light, red light categorization. But of course, there are other health considerations than just that. So I think those are health considerations worth making, but no big differences on iodine content. I'm going to keep watching out for Maria to enter one in. Do you still recommend sulforaphane as a supplement to prevent nodules from getting cancerous? I don't know if I did. If I did, I'll have to double check on that. I actually couldn't find current data about sulforaphane being a factor for thyroid nodules becoming cancerous specifically. So I did see some good evidence towards the ingredients in Nodule Control being relevant that way. Okay, Maria's question is already written above Dr. C. Huh. Here it is. Thank you so much. Okay, Maria's. And let me just wrap that one up to the crowd about the sulforaphane. Yeah, I couldn't find evidence on that. No drawbacks I can think of to sulforaphane, useful thing, but I didn't find it good evidence for its relevance to thyroid nodules. Now, Maria's question, sorry I couldn't unmute you. I have a 3-centimeter calcified nodule on the left side, currently awaiting second biopsy. Doctor said blood tests are normal. Can that nodule be reduced with your supplement or any natural medicine, or is the only option surgery? If the Maria, if the doctors do not encourage surgery for you, but they encourage watching and waiting, these things can be good options for you. If they do suggest that surgery is appropriate, I would move forward with it. And the other steps that I've talked about are still good steps for your overall health and for the response of your remaining thyroid if they take half of it out, or your response to thyroid hormones overall if they take all of it. So the other steps I talked about would still be good. Nodule control wouldn't be useful if your thyroid was removed, but if you had half of it, it still would be a helpful thing. But the other 3 steps are good in any capacity. So hopefully that is useful. Okay, let me get 1 or 2 more from chat. I better wrap it up for the night. Let's see. They did suggest surgery take half the thyroid out. Oh, okay, if they were recommending that and if they're doing another biopsy and they give the same recommendation, then that would be good to proceed with. Okay, lots of good questions here. And this is kind of a repeat. Look, at large multinodular goiter, but TSH is normal, not hypothyroid, but told by a functional medicine doc, I have Hashimoto's likely. So for this one, I'll actually be talking about hyperthyroid support in one of the coming weeks. And if you're not hyperthyroid now, but you have multinodular goiter, that will be the discussion that's most detailed and most applicable to you. I don't know exactly which week that is. I think that's 2 weeks from now, 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, do stay tuned. And the hyperthyroid discussion will be relevant for this one in some good detail. Considering percentage of nodules being cancerous so low, if nodules have been stable for 4 years and TRAD2 still need to focus on reducing the size of the nodules, for sure, 95% of them are going to be benign, but I would still want to lower the risks further if I could. So that's how I would feel about that. Okay, so quick one here from Kiana. I do not have nodules, but do have Hashimoto's TPO 790 and hypothyroid. Would you recommend a nodule control supplement? Kiana, I would not, but I would encourage the daily reset bundle, or the thyroid daily reset bundle, yes. And then also antibody support. That might be our next topic, but stay tuned. The antibody support would be good to get going on anytime. And that's a great fit for thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So hope that's useful there. Let me scroll and just see if I can find, there's a lot of really good ones here, you guys. Let's see. Yeah, let me grab this one. Josh is doing a great job with these questions. Thank you so much, Josh. Does the MTHFR genetic mutation that inhibits folate methylation affect the thyroid and or nodules? Anna, short answer is yes, it does. And the odds of someone having one of the several MTHFR variations when they have thyroid disease, those odds are almost 100%. So I assume that everyone that I'm formulating for does have that. So please feel comfortable and confident knowing that that's been taken into account. I see one hand that I've not gotten to before. And let me get that one and then we'll wrap it up for the night. So Dalton, you are going to bring us home. I hit the ask to unmute for you and go right ahead, my friend.
Hi, I'm not Dalton, that's my child.
All of our kids use Zoom for school, right?
Yes.
What's your name?
Tara.
Hey, Tara.
Hi. I'm really glad that you did this and I get to talk to you. I have Hashimoto's along with a couple of other autoimmunes, Epstein-Barr, post-mononucleosis syndrome or chronic fatigue syndrome, the new name for it. Anyway, my son has MTHFR and my last results for my TSH were 10 point something.
Mm-hmm.
And so
are you on medication right now or?
Well, I take natural. I don't do any pharmaceuticals.
What do you mean by natural?
It's thyroidium. Thyroidium. Okay. Yeah, I take that.
Is that a glandular, a thyroid glandular?
It is. Yeah, I believe it's made from rabbit glands, rabbit thyroid.
Rabbit thyroid. That's a brand new one on me. Oh, thyroidinium. Okay, that's a homeopathic. Okay.
Yeah, homeopathic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I take. But of course, with the problems going on with the FDA trying to redo homeopathics, getting my dose of 4CH, I can't get it anymore. So I'm relegated to a 6C, which isn't working so well, like the 4CH did. But with the 10, would any of your supplement that you have that we're talking about here, I don't have nodules or anything.
Sure.
Would that be of value for me?
You know, you could probably do really well with even just the thyroid daily bundle, and then also all the stuff in the thyroid reset diet. And you may understand this, but homeopathics are highly dilute. So there's not so much actual thyroid tissue left in that. It's diluted way past that point. But the thought is that there may be some signal it transmits that helps your thyroid improve. So yeah, and if that was useful, so be it. But the study that I mentioned was one of people who did a diet like the thyroid reset diet. They had average TSH scores of 14. And within 3 months, they were normal. They were cured again. So you could definitely benefit from that still. If you're not aware of having nodules, I wouldn't encourage you to take nodule support. There's no real necessity or benefit for that for you. But the daily bundle, the general steps I outlined as far as the reset diet and the iodine, those could be very useful for you.
Okay, yeah, it was way down, and I just had like a incredibly stressful year.
Okay.
So I am seeing someone, but I had 18 deaths this year of people that I knew. And so she's my doctor's not like, she's not like struck by the rise in my TSH, because she's like, you've been under stress that's immense for the year.
You know, stress is bad for everything. Believe it or not, there's a strong link between it and the onset of Graves, but there's not that strong of a link of it and the onset of hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. So any way you can manage it is great, but I'd still take steps to help your thyroid. I wouldn't assume that it'll be better if the stress is lower.
Immediately I get up here, and then I have to do that.
Okay.
And I went up the wrong side of the room.
All right. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. I will grab just one more, and then Scout's honor, this will be it. I got to start winding down myself here pretty quick. I just saw April pop up. So April, go for it. And you will be bringing us in tonight. It's all you.
Hi, I decided to put my video on so you don't feel alone.
Appreciate that. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you.
Good. So I have the MTHFR gene mutation. I have hypothyroid. I've been negative for Hashimoto's. I had Epstein-Barr as a kid. And right now my TSH levels are 0.15.
Okay.
And my iodine levels are also low. And I cannot.
You had iodine tested in what format?
Blood.
Okay.
Blood. And I take iodine supplements because my iodine levels are low.
Okay.
So I'm trying a different 24-hour urine test to discover if there's something going on, why my body doesn't take it in.
Well, so a couple quick thoughts. So you said negative for Hashimoto's.
Correct.
About half of people with Hashimoto's never have measurable thyroid antibodies. So when a doctor says your tests say you don't have Hashimoto's, that test means the doctor doesn't understand Hashimoto's. Now, iodine tests. So blood levels of iodine, maybe you just jumped on. Blood levels of iodine is in your thyroid, your blood, and your urine. And your body gets rid of excess through the urine. And between your gut to your thyroid and your thyroid to your urine, it floats in your blood. Now, if someone gets a massive dose of iodine, it can damage their kidneys, it can shut down their liver, it can be fatal. And the old medicine bottles that had the skull and crossbones on them, that's because iodine was a common means of suicide. So high doses are fatal. And there are a couple of medications that have huge doses of iodine, and some of them cause side effects that can last for months and years. And there's times to where a patient may have been on, the main one's amiodarone, someone may have taken it and they're horribly ill months later. And the doctor says, is this now a residual from amiodarone or is this something else? And what they can do is do a blood test of iodine and answer that question. That's the one and only value of blood levels of iodine. There's no relationship whatsoever between the iodine in your blood and the iodine in your thyroid or the iodine anywhere else in your body. Unless you've got so much your kidneys can't clear it, it doesn't change in your blood. And you could take it all day long and it wouldn't get higher in your blood until it became nearly fatal. Now, urinary iodine in populations is a very accurate gauge of nutritional iodine. The problem, however, is that there's so much variation for individuals. There's no relationship between any one test and your results. 24-hour iodine is better than random iodine. You're going to laugh at me when I tell you this, but a regular random urinary iodine test, it takes about 360 tests to be within 10% accuracy. 24 hours is better. 24 hours only takes about 178 tests to be within 10% accuracy. So it's totally useless in all honesty. In the modern world, thyroid disease is a disease of iodine excess. It's not a disease of iodine deficiency. The one circumstance in which it helps to test is if someone has already been on a low iodine diet and it doesn't help. A test might help them see if they're still detoxing it, if they're still getting a hidden source of it, or if there's someone to where it's just not relevant. And the one test that's good in that way is called the urinary iodine to creatinine ratio. So don't bother testing your iodine. Please grab the Thyroid Reset diet and check that out. You may see a lot of benefit by reversing your problems just from that.
Okay, so I won't worry about that at this moment, thanks to you. And,
not at all.
I have a question though. Fatigue has been an issue of mine forever. Would that be related exclusively to hypothyroidism?
Okay, so thank you so much. I almost forgot something really important. So your last TSH was 0.1 something, right?
Yeah, it was 0.15.
Okay, so you don't have hypothyroidism. You have hyperthyroidism.
Right, so we reduced my thyroid medication. Prior to that, I was hypo, and I'm on thyroid medication. Then we did that. So I'm on 70 milligrams of tyrosine, and
let's get you elevated. So that's micrograms. So
micrograms.
My pet peeve, 70 milligrams is fatal.
No. 70 micrograms. And I'm on liothyronine or Cytomel, whatever you call it. I was on 7.5 micrograms when I took this test, and I dropped down to
compounded because they don't make a 7.5 micrograms.
Well, I did a pill and a half.
Pill and a half is better than compounded.
Yeah. So now I'm just on 5 micrograms.
Okay. So the 0.15 is hyperthyroid. That can cause fatigue, believe it or not. It can cause fatigue and cause weight gain for people as well when there's too much. So yeah, just getting it right is super important.
Okay. So really, maybe even working with you to fine tune it even a little bit more could potentially help.
Do you have your thyroid still?
I do. And I do have nodules.
Okay.
I ultrasound and they showed,
it's been so exciting these last several years to see the results of iodine regulation for people. One big study that wasn't me, it was done independent of me. They did very basic iodine reduction recommendations on people who were on medication that had their thyroid still, and 84% needed less medication. 44% and stayed stable and stayed asymptomatic. 44% needed no medication and stayed stable and stayed asymptomatic. So people can feel better. People can need less medication. A lot of folks can see their thyroid work better again. It's a really cool thing.
Okay. Well, I'll check out all your books and your program there. My goal would be to be able to get off my thyroid medication.
Sure.
Because there's like a freedom in not having to be reliant on that medication every single morning. So
I totally get that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me grab a couple of follow-up comments to those things. So this is from Michelle. Why is a pill and a half better than compounded? I'm on compounded T3/5 only thyroid med. Yeah, Michelle. So compounded medication, I train doctors in this stuff. Compounded medication, there's no quality control process. And there's tons of case reports each year about people who nearly die, some that die from compounded thyroid medicine. There's a lot of talk about it being restricted or banned. There are some compounders who do it better than others and some that are totally fine, but I would never take or never prescribe a compounded thyroid medication. The ones that are made with the world's best technology and quality control still have recalls. Compounded medication is not recalled because there's no testing. No one ever has to test it after the fact. And to compound things at a microgram level is difficult or impossible to do well. Now, the other discussion I want to have is just T3 as a monotherapy. I wouldn't encourage T3 as a monotherapy. Your body needs T3, T4, T2. The drawback about taking T3 by itself is that it causes you to make less of what you would make anyway, but it doesn't give you the full spectrum of those hormones. So it's not good by itself. You're on what should be a small amount, but yeah, I wouldn't be on compounded and I wouldn't be on monotherapy. I've seen catastrophic things from both of those. So there's that. And I thought I saw one more thing. Oh, I saw a comment earlier about shipping outside the US. I think it looks like Josh addressed that. Someone asked about shipping to Canada. There is a source we found now that does help people with shipping called Reship, I believe. Yeah, Reship. This is a great option. So if you are outside the United States, you can use reship.com. And basically, they give you a US address and it's totally legitimate stuff. You order things to this US address, and they then reship that back to you wherever in the world is helpful. So that's a good option outside of that. And I saw Emma would love to see that study. I think you're referring to the study about the reduction in medication. I wrote an article called Deprescribing Thyroid Medication, and I will give you that link. It was one of the ones that I talked about in that. It was pretty cool. Here we go. Okay, Emma, this is everything you need to know about deprescribing safely. And that's one of a couple of studies I talked about in detail in there. All right, when I'm all done, you guys, I'm gonna leave the Zoom open for a couple of minutes, just so you can grab some links out of chat or other things out of chat there. I don't want that to go away right away, but otherwise I'm gonna tune out and wind down and see my family, and I'll be back again next week for our next topic. If Josh is still here, he might know what the next one is. I'll need to know soon, but I don't know off the top of my head right now. Hyperthyroidism. Thank you so much, Josh. So the gentleman earlier, I think it was the gentleman who asked about nodular goiter. This would be the one that I mentioned for you. Might have been Gary or yeah. But all right. Have a good evening, you guys, and I'll see you again really soon. Bye-bye.